Welcome to HackerRank challenge number 11. This one's called Finding the Percentage. And here we're provided with a dictionary that has student names as the key and then a list of their grades. There's 3 grades for each student. And we're also provided with a specific student name, and we're meant to look up their grades in the dictionary and then calculate the percentage. And what's important is we're meant to then return the percentage with 2 decimal places. So this shouldn't be too difficult. We've done most of these things. We just have to put this together step by step. So the first thing that we'll do is just understand what it is exactly that we're provided with. You can see there's a lot of complicated looking code here, but at the end of the day, what we're really going to need is this dictionary, student marks, and we'll have a look at that now. And then the query name as well. So print query name. Okay, let's just have a look what that looks like. Okay, so here we can see it. This is a Python dictionary. If you're not familiar with those, definitely look them up. They're super useful. They have a key, in this case, the name, and we can specify this key to access the data that's stored behind it. In this case, it's a list with the 3 grades. And for this exercise, we're now also provided with a student name, which happens to be a key in this dictionary. So in this case, we're meant to retrieve the 3 grades that Malika got and then calculate the average. Okay, so we'll do just that. First step is going to be to retrieve the grades and put them into a list. So we'll have our list called grades, and those will be equal to the student marks. And specifically, we want the student marks of the student whose name we're supplied with in query name. So let's have a look if that worked. We just print grades. And yeah, that looks good. So these are Malika's grades. And now all we have to do is get the average. Okay, to find the average, we can actually make our life very easy by using some built-in functions in Python. So we'll have our average variable, and that's going to be equal to the sum of the marks divided by the number of marks, right? So the marks are in our list called grades. So the sum is just sum of grades, and then divided by the number of grades, which is going to be the length of that list, grades. Okay, now we can print our average. Let's run that. Okay, and you can see that even though we're getting the right number, this is failing the test case because we're meant to return this number with 2 decimal places. So let's do that next. Okay, so to add these 2 decimal places, there isn't really a whole lot to it. So typically what you'll do is you just look up online how to format floating point values in a string. I personally like to use F strings. In F strings, you write an F before the string, then you put the variable of the value that you want to display inside these curly brackets. And now if this is a floating point value, what you can do is you can write a colon, a dot, how many decimal places you want, and then F. So this basically means it formatted as a floating point value with 2 decimal places. So let's run this and see what happens. Yep, that looks good. Let's submit the code and see that it passes all the test cases, and it does. Fantastic. So I personally think that these HackerRank challenges are as much about just problem solving as they are about learning Python. So if you want a little bit more of a challenge and you don't want to use these built-in Python functions, you could just try and write your own. So we could, for example, replace this function with our own. Let's call that one getSum, and we would write it here. So in order to get the sum of the list, we would define our function getSum, and as an argument we would take our list L, and then we would get a let's call that mySum, which would be startup is 0, and then we would use a for loop to add the values of the elements of the list. So in this case we would have something like for element in L, mySum equals mySum plus element. So like that, we would just be adding all of our elements together and can finally return mySum. So now let's see if this still works with our own getSum function. We'll run the code. That looks good, and we'll submit our code, and that all works as well. Awesome. Okay, so I'll see you at the next challenge.